Hi everyone, Jay here. You know I like a good challenge, and that's exactly why I created this series. I wanted it to be open for everyone to suggest something, and the weirder the better. I didn't want to put this behind a paywall, because I wanted to hear from you all. Your suggestions have brought some of the best ideas for stories, if I'm being completely honest. And I'm really excited to share the stories for part 6 of viewer suggestions. I found some really good stories here, and it's all thanks to you. So, if you enjoy these tales as much as I do, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you never miss an episode. Your support keeps this journey going. And if you've got an idea for a story or a theme that you're dying to see, drop it in the comments. This is a true story from about 20 years ago, a strange and eerie incident that unfolded in a small mountain village where my family lives. Even now, I find myself thinking about it quite often, unable to shake the unsettling details from my mind. The village, home to my family, is nested deep in the mountains, hidden away in the dense forest. There's a facility for people with mental disabilities. And every now and then, one of the residents would somehow manage to escape, slipping away into the surrounding wilderness. Whenever this happened, the staff at the facility would begin by searching the nearby area. If they couldn't locate the person, then they would alert the locals, and together with the fire brigade, mountain rangers, and the police, they'd organize a full-scale search of the mountains. This kind of thing occurred perhaps once every 2 years when I was younger. They usually found the escapee fairly quickly, within a day or two. But one spring, 20 years ago, a female resident escaped from the facility and vanished without a trace. The entire village joined forces with the emergency services to search for her. It was a massive operation that lasted for days, with people scouring every inch of the forest and the mountain trails. Despite their best efforts, she was nowhere to be found. As the days turned to weeks and then months, hope of finding her alive began to fade, and the search was eventually, reluctantly, called off, and the village returned to its quiet, everyday life, though the memory of the missing woman lingered in the air like a shadow. Then, half a year later, something unexpected happened. Her body was discovered on a mountain road not too far from where she had disappeared. What was bizarre, though, was that she had been dead for only about 2 days. This raised many unsettling questions. Where had she been in those 6 months? And perhaps more puzzling, why were her clothes completely different from what she had been wearing when she disappeared? When she had gone missing, she was dressed in the facility's standard uniform, a basic tracksuit, but when they found her, she was clothed in an outfit that looked like it belonged to another era. A blouse, traditional Mompe work pants, and an apron. The kind of clothing was reminiscent of something worn decades, if not centuries earlier. Naturally, this discovery caused a lot of commotion in my parents' small village community. People whispered about what might have happened to her. Some speculated that she had been forced to work somewhere, though no one could fathom where. Back then there were no construction sites or active workplaces anywhere near the area, and certainly none where such attire would have been worn. The road where she was found was an old, seldom used path that led deep into the mountains. After a few hundred meters, it simply ended, disappearing into the dense brush and forest. There was nothing out there, not a single cabin, no signs of life, and the trail itself just dissolves into the wilderness. An autopsy was performed, and the results only deepened the mystery. Her stomach contained traces of meat and other food, suggesting that she had been eating recently. Strangely, her body showed no signs of decay that one would expect after 6 months. It was as if she had been alive and well, living somewhere during that entire time. The cause of death was determined to be either a heart attack or exposure to the cold, but I can't remember the details clearly, as I was only about 10 years old at the time. What I do remember, though, It's the adults whispering about something called Sakechi. This word, which I hadn't heard before, was mentioned more and more frequently after the police stepped back from the case. Afterwards, for years, I thought I might have imagined the whole thing, but recently, when I went back home for the Obon festival, I brought it up with my mum. To my surprise, she confirmed it, saying, yeah, that did happen, I remember it. So it turns out, it wasn't just a figment of my imagination after all. Curious, I asked my mum about the word, Sakechi. She explained that some people believe that it refers to another plane of existence. The kanji for this word is made up of the characters for avoid and ground, which presumably implies a place to be avoided, a place where one should not tread. There are those who speculate that Sakechi might be some kind of alternate dimension or entrance to another realm, like a lost village, hidden from the rest of the world. Perhaps the locals use this term for another reason entirely, but it feels like too much of a coincidence to me. When someone goes missing, the villagers start murmuring about Sakechi again. I'm not sure why they use this particular word, or why they seem reluctant to discuss it openly. Maybe they want to keep something secret, something that even after all these years, still lies hidden deep within the mountains. This happened at my old workplace a few years ago. It involves a female co-worker of mine. Actually, she was a year younger than I was, so I guess I could call her a junior colleague. In those early days, she seemed so cheerful and approachable. She went out of her way to be friendly to anyone she met, and that included me. I was really impressed by her outlook on life despite the stresses of the industry we worked in. I reached out to her one day, in kind of an attempt to take her under my wing. I said, hey, if you ever need anything, or, feel as if you're in trouble, you can always come to me, okay? She gradually began to rely on me. She asked to have lunch with me, and opened up to me about her private life and her relationships with guys. One day during one of our regular lunch dates, she turned to me and said, with a smile, you know what? I always check the guys I'm seeing's phones. One time, one guy I was kind of dating got a message from a girl I didn't know. Seemed to me like the girl might have liked him, so I chased her off. I sent her back a little something. He never heard from her again. She laughed about it and looked at me as if I was missing some kind of punchline. I replied with something along the lines of, what did you send her? I mean, I was curious. And if you've stayed with me this far in my story, I'm guessing you're a little curious too. She smiled again. That smile kind of made me squirm. It was like she was dying to be asked, and so ready to tell. Well, I took down her number, and I sent her a message, like I had gotten the wrong number, and then we got friendly. I had looked her up before I sent that fake wrong number message, so I knew how to get close to her. I arranged a meet-up with her, after about a week or two, and when she arrived at the designated location, I was there, with the guy she liked, and I deliberately flirted with him, in front of her. He couldn't believe his luck, and she burst into tears and ran off. She never messaged me again. I was kind of shocked about this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. In all honesty, she scared me. I learned from that day that her obsessions and desire for revenge was pretty frightening. It was mad to me how she sounded like she didn't even like the guy that she did that to. She just didn't want him to be with the girl who messaged him. She even said that after that day she treated him coldly and didn't bother meeting up with him again. After hearing all this, I became wary of her. I no longer was pleased to see her cheerful smile because I didn't know what was behind that smile. Not long after this, she started following me around work all the time. She even wanted to walk home with me from work. She was displaying that obsessive behavior that she had inadvertently warned me about, and it was giving me the creeps. She sounded to me like a textbook yandere. Hi, Jay here. For those unaware, yandere is a term used to describe a character in Japanese, usually female, who becomes violently possessive of a love interest. The term is a combination of two Japanese words, yanderu, which means to be sick, and dere, which means love-struck. Yandere characters are often sweet and caring before becoming extremely devoted to their love interest, sometimes in a violent or psychotic way. Back to the story. Walking around at work was one thing, but the walking me home stuff, gotta admit that was kind of weird. Like, things only got worse when she decided that she wanted to open up to me a little more about my private life. I had told her some things in the past, but at work I pride myself on being a little guarded, so I didn't tell anyone I worked with too much. When I tried to cut her questions off, I found that she was able to answer her own questions about me based on some research that she had been doing into my social media posts and or gossiping in the office about me. She would mention all kinds of things. She knew things about my boyfriend, the area of town I grew up in, my parents, the street they lived on. It was really unnerving. I didn't ask for any of this unwanted attention. Over time, her niceties dwindled away, and she grew super competitive with me. She would do things in front of my peers to undermine me and my work or try to bring me down. She was taking aim at my confidence and the reputation I had built for myself at work. Then the lies started circulating about me. She said that my boss had evaluated me in a recent meeting and determined that I was the company's lowest performer across all the key metrics. This simply was not true, but it didn't stop the busybodies at work from spreading the news around the office. The worst thing about the whole situation was the fact that she continued to smile at me and try to buddy up with me while this was ongoing. It was so weird that at some points I had to second guess myself. I couldn't believe it was her spreading all this disinformation and slander about me. At times I just wasn't sure. She seemed like my friend and my enemy at the same time. In the end, I left the company. Not because of anything she did. No, I just got a better job. I still get the occasional email from her from time to time. It just makes me think people are scary. The office I used to work in was 10 times more scarier to me than some haunted house from the movies. Not too long ago, I think about 2 months ago, I bought a second-hand TV for 2,000 yen in a local store in my neighborhood. My TV suddenly broke one night, and I didn't really have the money to replace it, so I bought something cheap and second-hand as a quick fix. One caught my eye in the store. The only issue with the TV was it had screen burn. Hi, Jay here. I really didn't know what screen burn was, so if you're like me and you've never heard of it, basically screen burn, also called as image burn or ghost image, happens when a TV or other screen shows the same picture for too long. This can cause parts of the screen to get stuck, leaving behind a faint, permanent shadow of that image, even when you switch to something else. You see a leftover image that won't go away. Back to the story. For the price of 2,000 yen, or $13, I didn't really mind the screen burn, because other than that, it worked completely fine. When I got the TV home and set it up, I took a closer look and I tried to figure out what had been burned onto the screen. To me, it looked like this TV had been used as some sort of security camera live feed because it was portioned into 4 separate boxes. Whenever I was watching TV, in some of the lighter parts of whatever I was watching, I could kind of make out that this security camera feed was likely inside a building. It was like the 4 portions on the TV was divided up into where cameras in different rooms were. It was kind of annoying, to say the least. I was wondering if I had made a mistake by purchasing it. Throughout the week, I started to think that I had been conned out of my money, because that TV seemed to have more defects than just the security camera screen burn. It kept randomly turning off and on when I was watching it. It seemed to have a power defect or something, so I made sure to unplug it when I went to sleep each night. I thought that my TV was a little weird, and even a little creepy, and I couldn't wait for an upgrade on it. Just the other day, I noticed something odd. I kind of couldn't believe what I was seeing. In one of the 4 sections that the TV was divided up into, I saw a person. I thought that the screen burn meant that the image that was burned on it, permanently. I didn't think it was possible for something else to appear. I really didn't like the figure I saw on screen. I decided to throw the TV out. I don't think throwing the TV out had anything to do with what happened next though, but I'm not so sure. So that's why I'm here, looking for advice, I guess. I'm having dreams. Well, actually the same dream over and over. The dream always starts with me approaching the outside of an abandoned-looking building. The building looked like it was once painted white, but parts of it was now chipped away and the paint had gone dull. There was something going on in that building. Chains clank, and I can hear people either shivering or sobbing. I feel as if there are people held against their will in there. I try to run away from it in my dream because I feel a terror inside of me so profound that I feel as if my throat is closing up. Just before I turn to run, I see a dark figure step into the entryway. I think that was the figure I saw on the screen. I try to run, but I can hear car doors open and people begin to chase me. I stumble and scrabble around on the floor, but the floor is littered with junk. I try to get to my feet, but then I can hear footsteps closing on me. That usually is the point where I wake up. The abandoned building is in the middle of nowhere. There were no other lights apart from the ones I could faintly see through the doorway. I have no clue where it is, or if it exists. I don't know what to think. Could the TV be related to it? Hi, Jay here. This is where the story ends. But there has been an update. Thanks for the advice, everyone. I think I'll go through with this suggestion. Why not go back to the secondhand store and ask where they got the TV from? I'm gonna go and ask tomorrow. I need to stop having these dreams because I can't take it anymore. I might need some counseling. Update. Sadly, I couldn't get any information from the store owner. He was really off-handed with me. He told me not to rake over old graves and to mind my own business. I guess that he is just protecting his customers' identities, though. That makes sense to me. Back to square one, but at least the TV's gone. I got a new one now. This would prove to be the poster's last comment on the TV he bought. What do you guys think? Cursed object? Was someone trying to tell him something? I first noticed when my girlfriend came over to help clean my apartment. Now, I'll admit, I'm not exactly the neatest person. My small, cramped apartment was practically a minefield of trash bags, random items, and all sorts of clutter. It wasn't like one of those crazy hoarder houses you see on TV or anything, but it was definitely chaotic. There were clear paths to walk. My chair and TV were free from mess. I did clean every now and then, but let's face it, when you're living alone, it's easy to let things slide. My girlfriend, she didn't like the state of my apartment, and she would often use it as an excuse not to come and see me. I would always have to go to hers. She would occasionally come over and help me out with the mess. She'd take one look at the place, shake her head, and then start tidying up. I'd feel a bit guilty, so I'd pitch in, even if I wasn't great at it. We'd usually get the place looking halfway decent by the time we were done. The day that this experience took place was no different. She showed me. She showed up and immediately started cleaning. I joined in, picking up books and random knickknacks, trying to put things where they belonged. We were working on opposite sides of the room. Then she suddenly stopped and called out to me. "Hey, come look at this." I walked over to where she was standing, and she was pointing at an outlet hidden behind a pile of old magazines and videotapes. Yeah, this happened a while ago. From one of the sockets, a long strand of hair was dangling down. Not just any hair. This was long, dark, human hair. "Whose hair is this?" she asked, her eyes narrowing on me. She knew all my friends were guys, and I've always kept my hair short. Her hair wasn't this long either. I was just as confused as she was, so naturally I began to feel hot under the collar. I didn't have an explanation. I could see she was starting to get suspicious, so I reached out and carefully pulled the hair from the outlet. As I tugged on it, I felt something weird. There was some resistance. Do you know what I mean? The strand of hair went taut, and then there was sort of a snap, like when you pull a hair straight out of someone's scalp. The long strand fell to the hardwood floor, landing on the freshly cleaned surface, and swaying slightly in the breeze. It stood out like a sore thumb. I just couldn't figure it out. Why is this happening? Curiosity got the better of me, and I bent down to peer into the outlet. All I saw was darkness. Nothing unusual, just a black emptiness inside. I do feel as if there was some empty space beyond the 2-pin sockets in the wall that stared back at me. I tried not to think of it much after that. My girlfriend and I finished cleaning, and later that night, we went out for karaoke. We had a few drinks, sang some terrible songs, parted ways. As it was a Sunday night, and by the time I got home, I was too exhausted to do anything but collapse in bed. The next morning I was running late as usual. I jumped out of bed, threw on some clothes, and grabbed my bag. As I was rushing to leave, something caught my eye. The outlet. I froze. There it was again, a long strand of hair, just like the one from the day before, hanging limply from the same socket. A black strand of hair, obvious on the hardwood floor. I was a little more than freaked out. I had definitely pulled that hair out of the socket yesterday, so why was it back? I hurried over, yanked it out, feeling that same weird tension, and then ultimately, the unsettling snap. I kind of shuddered at that sensation, so I did something impulsive. I grabbed an old CD player, a boombox, that I hadn't used in ages, and I plugged it into the outlet. I figured if something was weird about that socket, then maybe covering it up would help me forget about it. I tossed the strand of hair out the window and watched as it caught the wind, and then I rushed out of the door. For the next few weeks, life returned to normal. I got busy with work, and before I knew it, the apartment was back to its usual state of clutter. I started stacking manga next to my bed, and the bin was overrunning with trash. Every now and then, I'd think about that outlet, but with something plugged into the output, I managed to push it to the back of my mind. Then, about a month later, something happened that still gives me the chills. I woke up in the middle of the night to a strange noise. At first, I couldn't figure out what it was. Groggy and half asleep, I fumbled for the light switch and squinted around the room. The noise was coming from the boombox, which was weird because I hadn't touched it in weeks. The sound was this low, grinding noise, like the radio was trying to play something but couldn't quite manage it. I got up and walked over to it, noticed that the stacks of manga had been toppled over, scattered around the room. It didn't make any sense. There's no way the radio was loud enough to knock them over. This weird grinding noise was still ongoing, and it was seriously starting to creep me out. I reached for the power button, and that's when I noticed that the boombox was already shut off. I stared at it for a moment, my hand hovering over the switch. How could it be making noise if it was turned off? Was it broken? I grabbed at it with both hands, intending to move it, and that's when I felt it, again, that same horrible sensation. The cord was tangled in something, a thick mass of hair, tightly wrapped around it like vines. My heart started racing as I traced the hair back to the outlet. There, where it was spilling out of the socket. This wasn't just a strand this time, this was a full-on clump of long, dark, dirty-looking hair. And it was pouring out of the socket and wrapping around the boombox's cord. I yanked it away from the wall socket hard without thinking. Snap. The feeling of 1,000 hairs being ripped out from someplace vibrated through my hands. At that exact moment, a piercing scream echoed around the room. It was so loud and so full of pain that I nearly dropped the boombox. The hair unraveled from its cord, fell to the floor, and that's when I saw it. Blood. Thick, dark blood was oozing from the socket, pooling on the floor beneath it. I let out a scream, stumbling back, crashing into the bed. The last thing I remember was the room spinning as I hit the floor. When I came to, I rushed to my feet, cleaned up as best I could. I knew I couldn't stay there any longer after that. I needed to get out, and fast. I packed a bag, grabbing my essentials, and I left the apartment, barely looking back. But just as I was about to walk out of the door, something made me glance over my shoulder, towards the outlet, one last time. A single strand of hair was hanging from the socket again. But it wasn't just dangling lifelessly like before. It was moving, slowly, almost deliberately, swaying back and forth, like it was reaching for something. No, not something, someone. It moved with an unnatural fluid grace, like it was alive. "Don't leave me. Stay." The voice was coming from the outlet, from inside the outlet. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and bolted out of the door, slamming it shut behind me. I didn't stop running until I was out of the building, my chest burning and my legs trembling from exhaustion. I kept going, not daring to look back, not daring to slow down, until I was far, far away. I never went back to that apartment. I couldn't. I found a new place, and threw away anything that had come from that room. I tried to forget what happened, but the memory has always haunted me. Sometimes late at night, I'd wake up in a cold sweat, certain that I could hear that voice again, whispering from the darkness, begging me to come back. The sound of static would fill my ears, and I swear I could feel something brushing against my skin. Soft, like hair. But the worst part, every now and then I'd find a long strand of hair on my pillow, or caught in my clothes, even though I've kept my hair short ever since that night. It's stupid, but I think whatever was in that outlet is waiting for me. It's patient, and it's hungry. One day, it might find a way to reach me again. My girlfriend thought I was crazy, and she didn't stay around too long after that. As for me, I like things to be clean these days. Clean and pure. Let me tell you, there's one theme that I've been chasing for a while, one that's been particularly elusive, always just out of reach. It's a story set in an industry that doesn't usually come up in conversation, at least not in polite company. This is about the adult industry. But before you start imagining cheesy soundtracks and dim lighting, let me assure you that it isn't that kind of story. No, this one's different. It's the kind of story that might stick with you long after the lights are out. You see, I've been asked a few times to get a story from this industry. and after a lot of digging, I think I found something worth sharing. So if you're still here and you're curious, let's go. Link in the bio if you want to conduct some private research later. Let's begin. In the world of adult video, AV production, filming usually takes place in rented studios. The locations often carry a certain reputation. Think of the type of building which would allow that kind of footage to be conducted in there. It's not exactly going to be a public place, right? Places which are perhaps secluded, disused, and almost forgotten are the types of places which can make a good spot to shoot something away from prying eyes. And unsurprisingly, these places are also home to eerie stories and unsettling rumors. Let me tell you about something strange I experienced during my days as an editor for adult magazines, back then when I was still in the industry. It's a story that's stuck with me ever since. At the time, part of my job involved casting AV actresses for photo and video shoots, and booking studios where the shoots would take place. This particular shoot was no different. I had reserved a 3-story house that I had never used before as our studio for that day. It was one of those locations that had stories attached to it. You know, a jikobuken, a home with a history. I didn't pay much attention to the rumors. I liked the price, and I was more focused on getting the perfect shots for the cover. As the editor, I was in charge. I had to arrive at the studio early, before the models, the photographer, or any of the other staff, just to prepare everything. It was routine. I had done it many times. But I couldn't shake a strange feeling as I entered this new studio. Still, I brushed it off as nerves about using a new location. Once inside, I took a tour of the place, checking out each room, trying to see where we could get the best shots. The first floor was standard. Living room, kitchen, nothing out of the ordinary. The second floor had a couple of bedrooms, and everything seemed perfectly normal there too. I didn't notice anything unusual as I wandered through the rooms. After completing my initial inspection, I settled in to wait for the rest of the team. The model and the photographer arrived shortly after, and as our makeup artist was working on the model, the photographer and I began discussing potential shots. We started with ideas for the first floor, then moved on to the second, and as we were talking about lighting and angles, I casually asked the photographer, "Do you think we'll need to use the third floor?" To my surprise, he immediately responded, "No, we won't be using it." His quick reply caught me off guard. "Oh, any particular reason?" I asked, trying to keep the conversation light. I thought that the natural light up there and the decor seemed fine, so I didn't really know why he was so quick to dismiss the idea of shooting there. The photographer gave me a strange look and asked, "Hey, are you the type who can't see things?" I was confused. "See what?" He hesitated for a moment before answering, "Well, I don't care if you think I'm crazy, but I have to tell you what I just saw, just now. There was this black shadow on the stairs, leading up to the third floor. Like a dark mass, and I just don't want to go anywhere near it." At first I thought he was joking. I chuckled and tried to brush it off. People in our line of industry do try to keep things light, just to get through the day, but something about the way he said that made my skin crawl. It played on my mind. We parted one another, and I went to speak with the others on set. The model, now finished with her makeup, joined us. Out of nowhere, she asked, "We're not using the third floor, right?" That's when I really started to feel uneasy. The photographer didn't say a word to her. She just came out with that by herself. "We don't have any plans to use it right now," I replied cautiously. "Why do you ask?" She looked relieved and then she said, "Good. I'd rather not go up there. I just get a really bad feeling from those stairs and I don't know why." I'll be honest, It was the first time in my life that my heart skipped a beat on set. I don't think I need to tell you that in our line of work, you have to be pretty brave, out there, and basically the opposite of being shy. But her saying that shook me. First the photographer, and now the model. Both were feeling uneasy about the third floor. I couldn't shake the feeling that something could be seriously wrong in that part of the house. Worse still, something that I wasn't able to pick up on. Despite the growing tension, we continued on with the shoot. We focused on the first and second floors, getting some great shots. We had a job to do. I wasn't being callous to make them stay, they were paid. But as the day wore on, I couldn't stop thinking about what they had said, and my curiosity got the better of me. During a break, I decided to take another look at the stairs to the third floor. I don't know what prompted that. I think safety was at the forefront of my mind. And if anyone was upset on set, I wanted to alleviate those fears if I could. I walked slowly up the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the empty house. The higher I went, the more the air seemed to thicken around me. When I reached the middle of the staircase, I saw it. There, just at the top of the stairs, was a dark, shadowy mass. It wasn't a trick of the light, or a shadow cast by something outside. It was just there. A black, shapeless form that seemed to pulse and shift, almost as if it were alive. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadow didn't move towards me, but it didn't need to. Just being near it filled me with an overwhelming sense of dread. I feel like it was watching me, waiting for something. I don't know how long I stood there staring at the dark mass, but eventually I forced myself to turn around and walk back down the stairs. My legs felt like they were made of lead, and my mouth was dry as a bone. Back with the others, I didn't say anything about what I had just seen. I think that they could sense a change in me. I don't know. I must have shot about 1,000 nervous glances towards the doorway that led to the third floor. We finished the shoot, without incident, but the atmosphere was tense. The model and the photographer both seemed eager to leave, and I didn't blame them. As soon as we wrapped up, we all packed up our gear and left the studio as quickly as possible. I never went back to that studio again. I made sure to book other locations for future shoots, even if it meant paying more or driving further. The memory of that shadow on the stairs still haunts me to this day. I don't know what it was, and I don't want to find out. All I know is some places are better left alone. I'm a train driver, and I want to share an experience that happened to me when I was at work driving the last train of the night. It was raining heavily that night. It showed no signs of letting up. I was at the starting station for the beginning of the route. It would be my final journey of the night along the tracks. I was preparing to depart from the station. I was anticipating that the signal lights above the track were about to turn green. I watched as the light turned from red to green. The only issue was it turned green for about 1 second, and then the signal light went out. I thought, oh great, what a great start tonight. I presumed a bulb had blown or something, so I contacted our control center via radio. When little anomalies like this happen, the rule is to treat it as if the light was still red, so I remained at the station. I thought that we might be stuck there for a little while. If I was supposed to continue without the use of the signal lights, I would have received an instruction from dispatch. It's called the instruction communication method, the method in place for starting the train when the light is either red or out. I sat there for a while, waiting for my instruction, but it wasn't exactly forthcoming. I put a message out to the 2 passengers I had on board, and told them that in all honesty, we could be delayed for an undetermined amount of time. Fortunately for them, and for me too, those 2 passengers got picked up by either family or friends from the station, so I didn't need to keep them waiting or feel guilty for delaying their journey home. I mean, it was the last train home for them, and it was really coming down out there. All told, it took about an hour to get the signal lights repaired and up and running again. Once operations were restored, I could begin my journey. I found out from dispatch that the reason the light went out was due to an animal biting through the signal cable, which was most likely a tanuki. I should say at this point that the train route was pretty rural. I worked and lived in a mountainous region of Japan. I began the passengerless final descent along the tracks. I didn't expect to see any passengers waiting for the last train of the night at any of the other stops along the route, as my train had been delayed for about an hour. I took the train up the steep mountain pass and realized that I had only been alone operating a train at night a handful of times in my career, and each time I found it eerie. After I climbed the steep pass, I came out at a flat clearing with dim station lights illuminating the platform. To my complete surprise, I saw a figure on the platform up ahead. The only issue was that if this was a passenger, he was waiting a little too close to the start of the platform. Also, this stop wasn't a scheduled stop, so I had no intentions of slowing down. Then something dawned on me, and I started to worry. But it was too late. I couldn't change what was about to happen. The figure ran towards my approaching train and leapt into its path. I activated the emergency brakes, but I couldn't stop in time. I winced in anticipation of impact, but I didn't hear or feel anything. The train came to a complete stop at the platform. I remember what I thought at the time. I've completely ran him over. But like I said, I felt zero impact on the tracks and against the front of the train where I was sat. I hopped out. I went against protocol, but I didn't care. I wanted to know if I hit something or not. I dropped down to the tracks and I hit the gravel pretty hard. I stooped to inspect underneath the wheel trucks. It wasn't long before I was absolutely saturated with rainwater. My shirt was clinging to my skin. I didn't want to be outside in the elements for too long, but I wanted answers. I was scared that someone had been fatally injured. There was nothing there though. I did hear some wild animals, probably tanuki, scurry away from the tracks and down into the brush and out of sight. They raced from the train tracks and I watched them for a second or two, and then something caught my eye. I looked ahead, up the track, and I noticed that there was something up with the signal lights again. They looked distorted. I was already soaking, so I thought I might as well walk along the gravel ballast to take a closer look. As I got closer, I realized that something was very wrong up ahead. Due to the intense, heavy rain, the sleepers, those rectangular objects that support and secure the railway tracks, had been pushed away. As we were up the mountains, and it had been hammering it down with rain from morning to night, I think that some of the older sleepers had become dislodged and separated from the tracks, like they couldn't withstand the downpour as the rush of water came rushing down the mountains. I am certain that if my train departed as scheduled that night without any of the stuff that followed that night, then my train would have been derailed. If we had no issues with the signals, and if there hadn't been that phantom figure on the platform leaping into my train's path, then things would have been very different. I don't know, but I feel as if all those things that happened that night to delay me happened for a reason. Maybe they were signs. I'll never forget that figure on the tracks, the tanuki, the rain. I'm really lucky to still be here.